Yeah, so you are aware that Paul Giamatti is playing you in the movie, and so you feel good about that. You
I don't feel anything about it.
Neutral.
I don't care one way or another. You know, they didn't reach out to me. I have no input on it, and I think it's inappropriate for me to talk about anybody that's playing in it. You know, I understand that he's a good actor.
Right.
I don't know him. I don't care.
So
The only way I'll care is if they libel me or slander me, and then I'll sue.
And what would you deem grounds for a libel or slander?
Anything that isn't true.
Okay.
The truth is always the test.
Truth is the test. Hollywood is known for falsifying and changing historical events, correct? Right. So basically, we'll see when it would come out.
So what do you feel about the movie so far, with whatever you've heard?
I know nothing about it. You know, I'm not going to make any comment on it. I haven't been invited over there, and you know, I really have no idea. You don't care? I mean, I do care, but at this stage, I don't care. I'll care when it's on the screen.
So do you feel like you should have been involved in the making of the movie?
Well, I'm astounded. First they were with New Line, which is Warner Brothers, and then they were with Universal and Turnaround. And I'm astonished that nobody has reached out to me. Because there's only two people that actually knew what went on. And that was Eazy and I, the two guys that founded the company. So, you know, Cube was very young at the time and wasn't one of the original members. And Dre wasn't concerned with certainly what was going on. He was concerned with the music, you know, and he was responsible for every record that ever came out on Ruthless, except for Bone Thugs and Harmony, but he had already left by that time. So, and his widow met him in 1991, which was really after the glory years, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's hard for me to believe that somebody wouldn't reach out to me to...
Yeah. Maybe we can figure out the bridge somehow between you and the movie. Yeah, Trouble and Beyond. Wow, there's so many things. Sorry, did you say something?
Well, I was just going to say, so do you think that, like, you know, you intentionally were not reached out to?
Absolutely.
Right. And
not hard to reach. You guys got me on Facebook.
Correct.
How hard am I to reach?
Right.
I answer every single inquiry that I get. So, you know, obviously I'm not too hard to reach.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fascinating that they wouldn't reach out to the real person of one of the main characters. I mean, they have a Oscar-winning actor, if I'm not mistaken, portraying you. You know, surely he's gonna have a large role in the film, and it's just we'll see. Yeah, it's funny to me, but that's how the business works, I assume. I wanted to ask, like, so yeah, like you said, you and Eazy are the only two that knew really what happened, because you were able to see everything.
Well, the inside workings, you know. And, you know, show business has two parts to the word show business. Show and business. Eazy took care of the show, and I took care of the business. And, you know, we lived next door to each other. And, you know, we would catch up every night about 3:30 in the morning. And as his day ended and mine was just starting, you know, we would catch up in my office upstairs. He had a key to my house. I, of course, had a key to his house. And he would come over and see, you know, what had transpired during the day. So we all knew everything, the total picture, he and I.
And you had a personal friendship.
He was like my son.
Wow. And was he the closest that you've been, like, with an artist that you've worked with, or is there been...
I have other artists that I've been close with, but, you know, over the period of time from March 3rd of 1987 through March 26th of 1995, I mean, we were together literally 20 hours a day. So, and he was like my son, and we founded the company together. And so, like I say, I have had close relationships with some artists, but I'm asked this question all the time, and I think my answer is really good, and that's most people ask me, are you still friends with Elton John? Are you still friends with Van Morrison? Are you still friends with,
Right.
obviously not Marvin Gaye. But I've always said this, that usually my relationship with my artist is a business relationship. So when we terminate our business relationship for whatever reason, the group breaking up, somebody retiring, somebody dying, whatever reason it is, normally our personal relationship ends because we only have really one thing in common, and that's we both like what they do. Other than that, we have very little in common. So like Eazy and is the most unlikely relationship of all. I was tall and he's short. He was black and I was white. I was very well educated. He dropped out of school. He was from Compton. I was from a little town in Ohio. It couldn't have been a more unlikely relationship. And of all the things I've ever done in my life, I brought Elton John here. Nobody had ever heard of him. I brought Pink Floyd here, ELO, and of all the things that I've ever done, I think the most rewarding and important period of my career was my period with Ruthless Records and N.W.A.
Yes,
and the Ruthless family.
You've said it before, right? You've said as much before.
Yeah, that's the period that I look back on and take the most pride in.
Is it because you feel that you kind of brought a whole new type of music?
I've done that before.
You did do that before.
Okay, but that isn't it.
Right.
When you look at N.W.A., just look at some of the things that they've done. First of all, they put their hometown on the map.
Yep.
Compton wasn't on the map of the city of Los Angeles.
Literally not on the map.
Literally not on the map. They literally put their city on the map. So that's, pretty cool in itself. But I feel that they actually did more for race relations in this country than anybody except the two guys that were assassinated, that I think that N.W.A. really took up where Bobby Kennedy and Dr. King left off. So, they've done more for race relations in this country, just like the Beatles did for fashion and style and music in '64. I think N.W.A. did that for people in Kansas and Nebraska and Iowa and places like that, people who had never, gone to see or listen to music of that kind. I think for the first time, it exposed the problems and angst of our inner cities to what we laughingly refer to as white middle class America.
Yeah.
So I think that what they did was incredibly important, and I think that at the time the only person that realized it was me, because remember that I had started in rock and roll at the beginning of rock and roll. So, on a daily basis, I dealt with the Rolling Stones and Gil Scott-Heron and the Black Panthers. Now look what happened to the Black Panthers, because America was so terrified of them.
Shut down.
For the first time, when I heard Boys in the Hood, when Eazy played it for me, I said, wow, a white, middle-class Jewish guy like me from Shaker Heights, Ohio, can relate to that. I said, this is going to be a very important movement, and the LA Times magazine called it the album that changed the world.
Yep.
The world's most dangerous group.
Absolutely.
Dangerous.
Obviously, they weren't really, outside of Eazy, they weren't really gangsters. but they were poets and audio documentarians of their time. So they exposed to most of America, obviously not to New York and Los Angeles, Chicago, and places like that, where people grew up with that. But they exposed to most of America the problems of our inner city.
Yeah.
So it's very deep to you. It's more than music. It's you would say it has that much of a social impact. It brought white and black together, and
Well,
then some,
I don't
in
know
a
if it brought
sense.
them together, but it allowed them to understand each other
understand.
better. And understanding is the first step to really, when you understand somebody else's problems, as they say, when you walk a mile in someone else's shoes.
Right. It at least brought a step to
I
get.
definitely think that growing up listening to N.W.A, I remember hearing "Dope Man," and that song was like pretty much the first breakdown of crack dealing. What a strawberry was.
Right.
What it was to be addicted to crack and whatnot. I mean, there was no other hip hop that was out there like that. And of course, fuck the police. If you look at what's going on even right now, it still speaks to today's time. Police brutality, unfair treatment. It's before the riots. Fuck the police came out, and look what it was like a prelude to. So it was definitely important.
Rodney King wasn't exactly the first African American that ever got beat up on a freeway
Yeah.
by a bunch of cops. It's just the first time that anyone ever videotaped it.
Yeah.
And that, we put out Fuck the Police before Rodney King's beating. In fact, Eazy was in Brasino's trial in Simi Valley because Harlan Braun is a friend of mine, and Eazy was there every day because Eazy had an unquenchable, insatiable thirst for knowledge, and he wanted to know everything and as much as he could, and he was at that trial every day.
Yeah, it got
Nobody knows that either,
Yeah, but
Just
you
me,
do.
Just me and Harlan Braun.
Harlan Braun. Who was that?
Harlan Braun is a great civil rights humanitarian lawyer,
Attorney. Yeah.
and he was Brasino's lawyer.
I see there. Yeah, I wanted to touch on just a base account of your roots and what got you into all this. And I remembered a question, which is, you thought this instantly, like when you heard Boys in the Hood, you just knew it right then. You're like, this is going to be a hit.
Instantly.
That's how it works for you in the music industry?
No, but it didn't.
Not usually.
Normally, people don't bring me finished music. So, you have a lot of elements then that come into play. And he played me Boys in the Hood, and I said, wait a second. This is what the Black Panthers were all about. This is what the rebellion of the Rolling Stones and kids and their parents. This is the poetry of Bill Scott Heron. I said, this is the most important music I've heard since 1965.
And music was always supposed to do that, to shake things up, to scare the parents, rock and roll at least.
The rebellion of kids,
Right.
It gave them something of their own that they didn't have to share with their parents.
Wow.
Freedom of expression, really. That's what I feel like it was. It's just free expression. Like, look, this is what I'm going through. This is what's going on. Here you go. But nobody ever did it in such a raw, way. The way it impacted everything. I mean, and everybody, in the group has left a long-standing influence. And just to think how one rap group can change really the way society looks at things.
Well, think about this. There isn't one person I've ever met, ever, that can't remember where they were the first time they heard Straight Outta Compton. They changed their lives, man.
Yeah.
That applies to me. I remember my friend played it on tape, on cassette.
Yeah, guys, they just tell me I was coming out of church with my parents, and just everybody remembers where they were. And they went, oh, shit.
That's Kennedy 9/11-esque right there. It just burned into people's brains, just like a cultural event, basically, like you said.
Never forget that.
They did it. They did not.
I don't care where they were.
Yeah. Wow.
So I actually wanted to ask, what made you want to get into music?
I didn't want to get into music.
Oh, really?
I had no idea. I went to this little school in the Midwest for 3 years, and through a number of events, I decided to come to California. And I came out after my junior year. I stopped in Vegas because my dad was one of the original members of the Mayfield Road Mob in Cleveland. So all the Vegas guys were all from Cleveland. So I stayed at the Desert Inn with friends of mine whose fathers were owners of the Desert Inn and the Stardust. And during that period of time, I tried to get into a number of colleges here. LA State didn't approve my credits. UCLA didn't approve my credits. The only school that approved all of my credits was USC. So I went to USC, $8 a unit. And then when I went to graduate school, I remember they raised it to $40 a unit. That was outrageous. So I came out here. I lived in Old Hollywood with a Murphy bed that came out of the wall, and I continued my education here and then went to SC Graduate School of Business. And then I went in the Army. And that was, I went in the Army in March of '63. I graduated in February, I think, of '63. I went in the Army in March, got out in '69. But, so when I got out, I was offered a job like at Security Bank for $425 a month. I said, wait a second. I went to school all this time, to go into work at a bank for $100 a week,
Right.
And my cousin had a big Vegas lounge act. And he said to me, I'll get you a job with my agent. So once again, it was $125 a week. It was show business, man. It was cool. Right. So I went to work at this little agency. I always called it Whatever Happened To, and then you filled in the name of our clients. Whatever happened to Frankie Lane? We represent. Whatever happened to Mickey Rooney? Whatever happened to Billy Eckstein? In fact, the first deal I ever made was for Billy Eckstein in Japan. But, and my boss was a guy named Marty Klein, who was a fantastic guy. He became the president of APA, and he was the guy that Steve Martin gave a Rolls Royce to for Christmas. But he allowed me to sit in his office, and I was real unhappy there because the guy that owned it was a drunk and a scumbag. So, and he was always talking shit, an old mob guy, because the mob owned everything in those days. Everything.
Right.
So a friend of mine named Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, who was also an agent, said to me, they're looking for rock and roll agents at ABC. And I was just getting started in rock and roll, because rock and roll was just getting started. Yeah. So I went over and he said, but you got to memorize Billboard's top 200. He said, or he won't give you a job. I said, okay. So I go over there, and his office is real dark. He had on a red linen sport jacket and was wearing rose-colored glasses, just like Julie Rizzo or somebody in The Godfather. Gave me a job, I think $175 a week. So my first big hit group was a group that had a #1 record called the Standells, Dirty Water. And they were, even though they dressed like English Beatles kind of guys, they were punks. It was really a punk group, and the record went to #1. And then I ran into, after that I ran into the Grassroots through a lawyer friend of mine named Jerry Cohn, and I started representing them. So this is like 65 now, I guess. So I spent 2 years there, and our offices are where Chanel is now on Rodeo Drive.
Right.
Those were our offices.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not a bad location.
Yeah. And on the bottom floor was a place called Pagano's Beauty Salon. And in Pagano's Beauty Salon was a kid that was a hairdresser there named Johnny Pagano. And he changed his name to John Peters and wound up owning Sony and married to Barbara Streisand.
Heard of him, yeah.
He was a tough guy.
Huh. Right.
And the movie Shampoo was really written about him.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I had a couple of groups. One of my groups was this group called Jim Duvall and the Gauchos from Fresno.
Right.
And they had 2 drummers.
The phone rings. That's okay. We'll turn it off.
Oh.
Just get back. Record. I turned it off. So here we go.
So
You're looking through your own book right now. Yes, I'm sure.
So, Jim Duvall and the Gauchos, and then I was in San Francisco, and I was looking for a bar where I could go pick up some chips, and I heard about this bar that here's the standouts. I heard about this bar that a lot of nurses went to, so I went in there, and there's a group called the Gollywogs who were playing there. And I said, wow, good group. They said, you guys are really good, but you got to change the name. So they changed their name to Creedence Clearwater. And I signed them, and
there we go.
them.
They were called the Gollywogs.
Yeah.
That was your first sort of really major act.
They weren't major then, but they became big very quickly.
That was 65?
60, yeah, either 65 or 66.
Fascinating.
And then 67, maybe Christmas of 66, I got a Christmas bonus from the place where I worked, and it wasn't enough to get a good stereo system, so I went to the boss and I said, listen, you know, I mean, I really need to have a good stereo system in my office. This is really embarrassing, you know. So he turned me down, and a friend of mine was working at a place called Chartwell Artist. And Chartwell Artist was a really high-class place on Wilshire Boulevard, run by a guy named Jerry Perenchio, who was probably the richest man in show business. He just sold Univision for $17 billion.
That's the Spanish, yes, the Spanish station.
You see, between him and Geffen and Ellison, they own all of them. But Perenchio was a really colorful guy, really class guy. Rock and roll was really just getting started.
Right.
So we negotiated a deal there, and he said, how much do you want? And I told him I wanted $500 a week in an expense account. And he said, oh, that's too much money. The head of the movie department here, and they represented Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, represented Jane Fonda and Roger Vadim. I mean, this was it was a small company, but with huge power. And he said, the head of our motion picture department only makes $350. I said, I know, but like the guys that I compete with, like David Geffen and Peter Golden and Sandy Gallon and guys like that, I got to be competitive, you know.
Sure.
That's what I need. So he agreed to that, and he said, go down the street to Hillcrest and get yourself a new Cadillac. And I got a new Cadillac convertible, and then when I was there, I really had all the tools I needed, so I brought the Guess Who here and represented the Byrds. And in 1969, the end of 69, I heard an album of this kid in England named Reginald Dwight III, and I brought him here, and we opened the Troubadour under his stage name, Elton John, and you know, that started. And then I turned him over to my assistant, who's still with him to this day, Howard Rose, who still represents Elton John. And I brought Pink Floyd here.
Very English connection. You seem to bring over these people from there.
But I didn't. Not all the big, the really big English acts were with Frank Barcelona at premiere. See, I didn't care. I liked new acts.
Yeah.
It was a niche, and it allowed me I was on an even keel with everybody, and it was something that I enjoyed, So in 1970, I guess I think it was 70, we did the first Ali Fraser fight, and then Parencio sold the agency to Ashley Famous, and the guy that had hired me, Don Fischel, he and I went in business for ourselves. And we called it Heller Fischel, and we were upstairs at Dick Clark on Sunset at 9121. And it was $150 a month, and he brought us lunch on Fridays. And Dick Clark was one of the great gentlemen in the history of our business. What an incredible guy. I just loved him. And Paul Revere and the Raiders had offices in the building, and we did. And in 1970, I got a letter from a kid in college that wanted to be in the music business. He was a freshman at the University of Illinois. So I said, well, if you can afford to fly out here, I'll take a meeting with you. I liked his letter. And he flew out, and I met with him. And he's done okay. His name is Irving Azoff.
Oh, yeah. Right. People are familiar with that.
So I met with Irving and hired him, and it was Fischel and I and Irving. And, that was Heller Fischel. And, a lot of other guys worked there over the years, who all became very successful. The guy that owns Polestar, Gary Bongiovanni, Dennis Turner, who managed George Benson, Phil Casey, who's the head of Resolution, Mark Hyman, who's the head of Ashley. They all worked at Heller Fischel.
So you really helped build a lot of champion agents and managers.
I had a feeling for it, and I knew that once again, there's two parts to the word show business. Mm-hmm. And it's just as important to cultivate, now they call it networking, it's just as important to cultivate relationships with Clive Davis and Mo Austin and Jerry Moss and Herbie Alford as it is to cultivate your relationships with Elton John and Pink Floyd. So those relationships, which I have cultivated and treasured to this day, these guys are still all my friends. I talk to Irving every single day, multiple times every day and every night. So, and we do lots of things together, and but those relationships are just as important, because if you waste your time cultivating executives that are going nowhere,
Yeah.
If you waste your time cultivating those relationships, then you've wasted your time. In a service business, the only thing you have to sell is your time. If you don't use it judiciously, then you go nowhere. So all the guys that I started with, David Geffen and Irving, have all turned out to be people that
they did all right for themselves.
Right.
And what's the biggest thing that's changed in the industry from when you started to now? And what do you see that's different, good, bad, ugly?
It certainly isn't good.
Right.
So there's no club scene anymore. Mm. You can't sell physical CDs. Mm-hmm. And 25 years ago, Irving said to me, man, forget the record business. The only thing that matters is touring and merchandising. And to this day, that's true. The only thing that matters is touring and merchandising. Right. There's no other money to be made.
Now more than ever.
Right. So I said, Irving, it's not what I do. This is what I do. I like what I do, and that's what I do. So maybe I haven't made as much as I should have and could have, but I'm happy with my career. I'll put my track record up against anybody's.
Yeah, I think that's worthy.
Well, I was gonna ask, like, I mean, considering that you've had so much success with other artists, I mean, you think about Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd changed the world with a lot of their music. You know, the whole using the synths and the psychedelic rock and all these other people, Irving Azoff. Why do you think people mainly know you for Eazy-E and N.W.A. in comparison to the rest of these people?
Well, Easy used to always say that I was the second most famous person in rap. He always wanted to do an album with me. But I think that I became known because of the notoriety more than anything else, because I was always in the background.
Yeah.
You know, the 20 biggest diss songs of all time, 6 are about me. You know? Cube, Dre, Game, Nelly, Tim Dog. I mean, there's the 6 out of the top 20 are all about
Nelly
me.
has talked about you?
Huh?
Nelly?
Yeah, and I never met the guy in my life.
That is funny.
Yeah.
No diss songs from you to them.
And I had never met Game either. I have now. Good guy. But he also had 2 songs about me. You know, so I think that those things, and then with the advent of YouTube and guys like Dre getting their videos played literally millions of times, Dre Day, you know.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I just became incredibly famous. But now, rather than people dissing me now, I've become this incredible icon, you know. Same guy, I don't do anything different. And I never did anything wrong to start with. But, you know, now when I go someplace, no matter where I go, whether it's East LA or Compton or whatever, people stand in line to get my autograph, and they're very polite and ask me questions. And
They're curious. They're interested.
I wrote a book, and I teach college, and you know.
Yeah, and you still work with artists and stuff in the same capacity that you always have?
Well, the business is so different now, you know.
Sure.
I am working with some artists now. I have a rock group from Pittsburgh who's sort of like the Allman Brothers.
This is 28 North.
Called 28 North. I'm just finishing up an album in Nashville that I think is going to be the album of the year with a girl named Leslie Coors Mather. One of the best records I've ever heard in my life. It's the first thing I've ever done in Nashville. Produced by Denny Deonte, who's an old friend of mine, who's done Streisand, Neil Diamond, Paul Anka.
Wow.
And this album, we cut it in Nashville, and it's spectacular. Spectacular. There's a song on it called Countrified. That's going to change. You guys can.
Oh, thanks. I'll keep.
That's going to change really the entire music business, because country music is really the rock and roll of the 80s.
Yes.
Yeah. Country music is the rock and roll of the 80s.
Yeah.
We mean coming to prominence and changing the game
And
that much.
It's the same. People play the records. People buy the records. I mean, it's the same as Motley Crue in the 80s.
Well, I also think that right now, I mean, country music is kind of like hitting bigger. I'm not.
It's pop.
Yeah, it's turning more pop. Yeah,
It's really pop.
They've had to merge it.
Yeah,
it too.
I mean, you know, just when you think about all of the new stars that have been coming out, you know, they're all like towards that countryside, you know, which is crazy, because maybe like 10 years ago you probably wouldn't have seen all those country stars coming out, even though they sell tons of records because they cover middle America, you know. I mean, from the Midwest to the South, you know, that's the music. That is the pop charts, you know. It's a regional thing.
Non-coastal, yeah. I mean, we don't.
There are stations in Oklahoma that you hear in Salt Lake City. There's stations in Ohio that you can hear in Kentucky, country stations. You know, they're all big, major, high wattage stations.
I mean, even in California. Yeah, I lived in the Inland Empire for a couple of years and heard a lot of country out there. A whole lot of country, like way more than I ever would have thought. And that's just the Inland Empire, you know?
There's a lot of land out there besides the cities people live on.
There's a lot of rednecks out there.
Yeah, and beyond,
A
yeah.
lot of crank out there, man.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's.
I've been to Moreno Valley, and There was a lot of crack out there. I was actually surprised. I didn't realize Riverside was like that.
Well, it spreads out, you know, it spreads out. Yeah, we'll finish up soon, but like that leads me to another inquiry, which is, do you think that hip hop in general has had a negative influence on society? Do you think talking about crack and whatever else and all this stuff is?
Are you talking about rap or are you talking about hip hop?
Well, okay, to differentiate the terms, you know, rap, gangster rap, whatever you want to call it.
I think that gangster rap is, in the past, has been the voice of the people. Nowadays, gangster rap, there is no gangster rap, but rap is pop now. The same stations play Snoop Dogg, play a Whitney Houston record, so
Yeah.
it's hard to,
True.
you know, it's hard to get behind maybe a decent record that comes out every once in a while, like Kendrick Lamar or whatever.
Right.
You know, but it's not, you know, it's not a meaningful movement now. It's no different than disco. But, you know, when you talk about hip-hop, you know, hip-hop is something else. Hip-hop goes back to guys spray painting subway cars in New York, you know, in the 50s and 60s. You know, Keith Haring and John Paul Basquiat, and then, you know, the Jamaican guys like Kool Herc came up from Jamaica and moved to Hollis, Queens, and, you know, so hip-hop is something totally, it encompasses a certain kind of rap that no longer exists.
The culture.
Right.
It's a culture.
Directly connected to something real. Now, what do you think is the future of the industry in 20 years and beyond?
Well,
Of all music.
there's only two kinds of music that have existed throughout the decades. One is church music, whatever you want to call it, gospel, R&B, hip-hop. It all comes from the church. The other kind that is very much like church music, except for the drums, is country western. Outside of that, everything's a fad. And these fads come and go. The economics of the music business have obviously changed dramatically, which is sad because you no longer have albums that tell a story like It Takes a Nation of Millions, or Straight Outta Compton, or Carole King's Tapestry, or, you know, you no longer have albums that tell a story. You have, if someone puts out an album, there may be 17 producers, and it's just a collection of singles. So the business has become totally iTunes, and it's not good for developing music. It just has to do with making money. And I'll tell you a quick story. I was in Paris with Otis Redding in 1967, I think. So this was before Monterey, and I just felt that this guy could be one of the biggest stars of all time. I knew his people in Macon, Georgia, and Percy Sledge was there, and Booker T and the MGs, and, you know, I just felt that Otis Redding, I mean, the guy wrote Respect for Otis, for Aretha Franklin. Wow. He wrote the biggest songs of all time. So I'm in Paris with the Stax Volt Review, and playing outdoors at the Olympia Theater in Paris. And he just tore the place up. I never saw anything like it. I mean, people just going crazy. I went backstage afterwards, because from there we were going to go do Monterey Pop Festival. So he had tears running down his face. I said, "What's the matter, man?" I said, "You just did the greatest show of your life." He says, "Dig this, man. Those people don't speak English." And that was like an epiphany for me. I mean, go see a foreign movie without subtitles. See how much you understand. Here's the guys singing in a language they don't understand. And it just epitomized to me what music is all about as far as communication goes. Now, so we go to Monterey in August of '67, and I mean, the Who were there, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. I mean, it was the most important musical movement of all time, even bigger than Woodstock. Yeah. Because even though Woodstock had somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people there, you know how many people were at Monterey?
No.
7,200 people, and it changed the world. You know why it changed the world? Because Clive Davis was there, Mo Austin was there, Bob Krasnow was there, Jack Holtzman was there, Ahmet Ertegun was there. Not a bunch of people smoking dope in the rain in Woodstock. Now we got people that made a difference in the music business. And they said, well, wait a second. Now, this rock and roll is here to stay. You know, you better forget about jazz now, because this is, and Clive signed Janis there, and the Dead, and it changed the world. 7,200 people really changed. We're sitting in chairs. So it was real special. And the guy that did Woodstock, that funded it and ran it, is the guy who all of you know and always say, who's that guy sitting next to Jack Nicholson with a hat on?
Yeah.
And that is
Lou Adler.
I knew that. I know.
He's the guy.
Man. Yeah.
And he produced the Mamas and the Papas. He produced Carole King. He still owns 100% of the Rocky Horror Show, which they still play.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like a cult.
Owns the Roxy, and his son runs it. But he's a guy that's not a very nice guy, but he was a visionary. And, he's the guy that sits next to Jack Nicholson with the hat on, and nobody knows who he is.
And he produced the festival, which is responsible for kind of the tentacles of the music business from then on. And there it goes.
Absolutely. He changed the vision of guys like Clive, who were there wearing $4,000 velvet suits, He changed the vision of the music business.
And there we have it. Yeah. And we continue on. No one quite knows where it's going to go or who's going to blow up or whatever, but you know. But
absolutely. There's only one place it can go. To the fastest growing demographic in the world. Latino.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it is. It's all about Latino.
It is.
Not only is it the fastest growing demographic, but Latinos work. I don't care how menial their jobs are. They all work.
Uh-huh.
They get married. They have children. They go to church on Sundays. They eat dinner together. It's a solid demographic. Okay? So I brought a group here in June and July. They're a Puerto Rican reggae group called Cultura Profetica. They have no records. They've never been here. Their audience speaks no English. We sold out 24 out of 28 dates, including 3 nights in New York City.
Mm.
Okay? So the Puerto Rican reggae is not the same as Jamaican reggae.
It's different.
It's more Buena Vista Social Clubbish, with some hip hop.
My family's Costa Rican, and reggae is huge.
Yeah.
People don't even understand how it affects the Latin culture.
Here it is.
It's
so I have.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with them. I'm dealing with Calle Trece, who have 22 Grammys. And they're up for 12 more this year.
12 more.
Okay. Cultura's been together 14 years. Calle Trece's been together 18 years. They've never been here. None of them have ever been here. I have a couple of Argentinian groups, Zona Ganja, and N.W.A. I brought N.W.A. here for 2 dates. They were lined up from Los Globos down on Sunset, 3,000 block of Sunset, all the way to the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
I was scared. It was so crowded. I said, if anything happens, there's no way I can get out of here. I said, I'm fucking leaving. You know, it was, you couldn't even breathe. There were so many people. You couldn't breathe.
This is what you do. You bring people. You bring people over, and then they sell out. Whatever club it may be. That sounds like a good.
So I'll bring Cultura back. We're going to play Radio City. We'll do a week in Radio City.
So what do you think about Latinos in hip hop?
Well, I think there you have the big problem. First of all, the Latino culture is so fragmented. Okay? So Chicago West is Mexican. Chicago East is Haitian, Nicaraguan, Puerto Rican, Cuban, 100 different things. So it's fragmented. Okay? So that's a problem to start with. The other problem is, and I've had the 2 biggest Latino records of all time, La Raza by Kid Frost and Mentirosa Melomanes. Those are the 2 biggest records of all time. Wow. They are. But you know what happened? Frost doesn't even speak Spanish. We had to teach him the words. In high school Spanish, I taught him the words. People forget that this was Mexico before it was California. Okay, until the mid-1800s. This was Mexico. Why do you think every street here, Ventura Boulevard, Figueroa, La Cienega, I mean, what kind of names are there? They're certainly not Jewish. Okay? So
everything.
This town is, the sheriff was, Libaco was Mexican.
The mayor.
The mayor was Mexican. All the city council was Mexican. The culture here was Mexican all the way up to Monterey. But what's happened is that when Latinos have become big, very big, they have no feeling for the culture, so they want to be white, like J-Lo or Ricky Martin. Okay? See, so the Latino youths have grown up with no icons of their own. Okay, and the other groups that have been reasonably big, like Lighter Shade of Brown and was a model, and those groups appeal to older people that don't speak English. Okay, the kids aren't into those groups. Okay, but the people that the kids could have been into, they're not. And I'll tell you who was well on her way to being a huge, huge star was Jenny Rivera. Man. Jenny Rivera was on her way to being a huge, huge star.
Which she already was in many ways.
Well, you're not a star when you're only a star in Los Angeles or Mexico City. You're a star when you're a star all over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jenny Rivera was somebody that I like. I went to see her at the Nokia. She did 2 sold-out shows at the Nokia. Grossed over $1 million. We had girls there from 12 years old to 70 years old. We had people there wearing prom dresses. There were no guys there at all. Pablito Vasquez and myself and Gus Lopez were probably the only men that were there. She drank 2 bottles of Patron on stage, just like Janice used to. And, she was an important person. And I don't speak Spanish very well, but I understood everything that she said. And she said stuff like, she'd grab her crotch and she said, any man that ever touches you, he never gets that again. She was like the Joan Baez of her generation.
Yeah.
Okay? And
she had a voice.
She was unbelievable. She had a good voice, not a great voice, but a good voice. And her songs were good, and I think she had a big chance. And then she flies in a 1969 Learjet, flown by a 78-year-old pilot from Monterey to Mexico City and crashes.
Such a common thing for these music legends for some reason.
Save a few bucks. You know?
Yeah. No, yeah, we're in it for plane and helicopter crashes. Like many things would
That's a
have.
great
Yeah.
story. Bob Dylan and I went to see, there used to be a country club in the valley called the Palomino. Everybody played. I mean, Elvis, everybody played. Perkins, I mean, Jerry Lee Lewis. I mean, so there was this group playing there called Kinky Friedman and the Texas Jew Boys.
Heard of them? Yep.
That's the name of the group.
Yep.
He just ran for mayor of Texas. I mean, governor of Texas.
Yep. I saw him on TV when he was doing that.
So we're all in the front row, you know, and this was in the 70s, so there was a lot of illicit pharmaceuticals in those days. Times were different, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We were all fucked up. We
Uh-huh.
were sitting there at the front table, and this chick walks in the door, and she was butt ugly, pimples all over her face, and wearing feathers and a bow. And I said, hey Bob, see that broad at the front door? I said, I attract girls like that, like I'm a magnet. You watch, she will come right over here to the table. I said, just something. So the guy that owned the place, his name was Tommy Thompson, great big guy, long silver hair down his back, mean, nasty guy. Let nobody in, you know. So she finally talked her way in. She walks in, she walks right to our table, sits down on my lap, you know. And Dylan's laughing. Sits right on her lap, and she says, "Hi, my name's Janis Joplin." It was the first time I just get choked up when I think about it. It's the first time I ever met her.
Oh. Wowzers! Wow.
I'm Janis Joplin.
Nice.
This was like.
And the night she died, she was at the Landmark on Franklin. And the Chambers Brothers, do you remember them?
Sounds
They
familiar.
were a black rock and roll group. Every guy was like 6'6". And they were big. And they called me. They were staying at the Landmark. It was next to the Magic Castle. There. And I think it's still there, but part of it's the Landmark, part of it's the Magic Castle Motel or whatever. He said, hey man, your girl just OD'd. It was like early in the morning. And she had died. Joined the 27 Club.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a crazy theory.
Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix,
Mm-hmm.
27 Club.
Yeah.
That's crazy too. I mean, just people who were so influential at a time.
But she had been known already at that time. Oh, this was like maybe the early.
In those days, she was a San Francisco act. She was with Big Brother. They got no airplay. They had no record deal. This was before.
Didn't you say that was in the 70s? I thought you said it was concert. Oh, this was before that. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. So this is before their career. Well, there you go. That's why it's you made it happen. So yeah, we've gone deep. That's for sure. If there's anything else you'd like to say, let us know. Otherwise, it's been fantastic.
Eazy-E was a true visionary. He was one of the brightest guys I ever met. He was willing to let you make a mistake and not throw it in your face.
Wow.
And he was really a good guy. He only had one weakness, and it was pussy. That was his weakness. And I used to tell him that all the time because he was so fucking smart. And, he had put together N.W.A. I represented those other guys in other groups. He had put them together behind my back and brought them to me and played them for me, and had McCullough out in front on the sidewalk, and Dre and Yellow were in World Class Wrecking Crew. Cube was in CIA. Those were Alonzo's groups, Alonzo never felt comfortable with misogyny and lyrics. He just, because World Class Wrecking Crew were like the Temptations of rap. Yeah. That's what they were, and they were the Temptations. Choreographed, you know, wearing sequins, and, you know. But Alonzo is an important guy that gets very little credit. And I'm the only guy that ever talks about him. But he's a very important guy. He lived in Johnny Otis's house. He bought it. He had a studio there, and a lot of people used to cut there. You know, it was rock and roll history, Johnny Otis. So I like Alonzo a lot. We still talk quite a bit, you know.
Right. And so someone like Eazy-E isn't the person he portrays on his records of being this ruthless criminal thug or whatever you found him to be.
Eazy-E was the only gangster in the group.
Right. But
I mean, Cube went to Taft High School.
Right.
You know, Eazy-E was a gangster.
He did what he said.
Right.
Yeah.
What he talked about something.
Right.
He had done it. He was, you know, I never knew him as that. Because once he met me, he knew how I was, and I'm very prudish about things like that. Not because I'm such a prude, but because it's bad business. It's just bad business, man. That's where they get RICO.
Yeah.
You know, it's bad business. I said, you want to come into your house one day, taking your mother's house away from her? I said, we're going to make a lot of money. You don't have to do this shit. And I know that he never did one really funny thing. He was funny. We got this Mossad guy and I were up at Joe Isgro's office in Burbank. And we were waiting for Eazy, who was always late. Mm-hmm. So after a while, you know, I normally would just do whatever it was without him. When he showed up, he could show up 3 days late. Yeah, right.
Right.
Same right time, but 3 days late. So I look out the window. This particular meeting we couldn't do without him. Because Isgro was the big promotion guy then. And he had these beautiful offices in Burbank. And I looked out the window, and there's Eazy. He had a lot of cars, but he was driving this Jeep. And in this Jeep,
let us know. So many calls to the master's house.
Thank you. I look out the window, and I see his Jeep down the front in a red zone. So normally in this Jeep, he had half a dozen automatic weapons, a couple of garbage bags full of weed, you know, whatever. Yeah, right. So he had his back to the window. He was a little gangster lane. He was talking on the phone because that's all he did. He used to get between 15 and 18,000 pages. Remember pages?
Oh, yeah.
A month. So the end of pagers was when they started charging for pages. First it was like whatever it was, $30 a month, and it was a quarter a page.
Huh.
So the meter maid pulls up, knocks on his window. He totally ignores it. Knocks on his window, and he goes like this. 1 minute. You know, I'm on the phone. 1 minute. So she takes out her club and she starts banging on his window. So he rolls down the window. He says, 1 second, I'll be done in a second. So she starts writing him a ticket. He grabs her ticket book out of her hand and drives away. Okay? So he drives into the building, leaves his car. Pretty soon there's helicopters there. And, that's a felony.
Right.
Yeah, that's a felony. So I called our lawyer, Harlan Braun. I said, Harlan, I got this problem. You know? And I told him he was hysterical. He says, well, I know some people in that particular city. I'm not going to mention it here because the guy may be running for office.
Huh.
So I said, okay. So he said, go over and turn yourself in. And I'll make a deal with you. And they'll make a deal, don't worry. So they impound his car, and we go over to City Hall, and I meet with the district attorney. We make a deal that we're going to do a PSA for their fire department and one for the police force. Or maybe we wouldn't do the police force. I think we were doing 2 for the fire. So I called Harlan back. I said, listen, Harlan, we got to get his Jeep back before they go through it. I said, this is really important. He said, I don't even want to know why. I said, yeah, right, you don't want to know why. He says, the impound lot closes at 6. I said, I know, Harlan. We got to get his Jeep back before they go through it. This is really important. So he said, okay. So we go over there with one of the city officials, and they open up the lot, we get his Jeep back before they had a chance to go through it.
Everything intact in there, huh?
Oh.
Wow. They impounded, so they just towed the car without looking at it yet. Wow.
Towed it right out of underneath this building.
After you've driven into the parking lot, not driven actually through the wall.
Driven in the parking lot,
right.
Into the parking garage.
Right.
Got out and came to the meeting, that's
there you
all.
Go. Right.
Left it there, and they took his car.
Yeah.
That was from the minute he left the car, it no longer was his problem. Then it was my problem.
Right.
Okay? No longer his problem.
But you recovered it.
He did what he had to do, and he left. He didn't get arrested, and he left.
That is a great story. No denying it at all.
So funny. He was a funny guy.
Yeah, that
kept giving it 1 minute,
Yeah.
1 minute. I'm almost done. 1 minute. Probably talking to one of his girlfriends.
Yeah, definitely gangster living. That's for sure.
Yeah, right.
Just not nobody else's rules apply, right? That's how you capture people's attention. I think it worked, right?
I got one question to ask you. I mean, everybody knows, okay, Bone Thugs came from Ruthless, N.W.A, Dre, Cube, everybody started there. Most people don't know that Black Eyed Peas were with Ruthless too. So, I mean, how did that come about, especially considering the kind of success that they have now?
My nephew, who's a very successful restaurateur now, he has a chain of restaurants called the Plan Check Rooms. There's one on Sawtell, and there's one on Fairfax. They're opening one in 3 weeks downtown and one in Pasadena. So my nephew was like going at Pepperdine and was like head of A&I. Dre never came in the office, so my nephew sat in the office. But he knew Wolf and Epic, who were big producers. Brett Mazer is a producer who now, he's one of the lead singers in Crazy Town. And a good friend of mine, his father was a very good friend of mine. His father discovered Billy Joel. So he brought Will in to meet me. My nephew did. And he met him through Brett and brought him in. Will was maybe 16 or 17. And he played me a video that he had done for $1,000. I mean, we did $150,000 videos that weren't that good. I mean, the guy was unbelievable. He was the greatest dancer I ever saw. I'd sing, everything he did. So I gave him $10,000 for the video that he spent $1,000 on. I put him on payroll, so this was 80s, $200 a week. He used to come out here and get it. And he was with us, and we would have put out records, but he died. Eazy died. But he's a really, really good guy. Will. And the other, those are all his friends. Ap the Ap, and those guys were with him then, and they're still with him. They're good guys. They were called At Band Clan, Tribe Beyond a Nation.
Band Clan. Yeah, they're local, huh?
The original
name. Still in it.
Fascinating. All right. I think we've gotten so much great material. I think we can end it there. Jerry, thank you so much.
It was definitely an honor talking to you.
Absolutely.
Hearing a perspective from, obviously, all these other guys, they already have their lanes of bringing their perspective, but when it came down to it, it was you and Eazy, working the business out together and just being around each
The
other.
difference is I always tell the truth. See, if you look at the back of my book, on the cover, when guys said good things about me, I put it on there. When Ice-T said, I met Jerry Heller once and didn't trust him, I put that on there. You know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Get
you
on
want people,
perspective.
if you want to have any credibility,
Give it to them straight.
yeah, and you have to tell them everything, not just what you want them to hear.
Yeah.
And these guys just seem to want to rewrite history, you know? And they don't even remember it.
Right.
Or weren't privy to it.
Weren't there, right?
Right.
But you were. Yeah, well, you've been straight up with us, so we thank you.
You know when I knew that N.W.A was going to be big? Besides the first time I heard him? Eazy and I were in New York. Bill Graham, who was a truly important guy in the music business.
Oh, yeah.
And a good guy. He escaped Nazi Germany in 1939 and walked across Europe. He was 12 years old. So he came to New York to live with his aunt. He was throwing a big party at the Park Lane in New York. And I think I don't know what we were doing there. I think I was making a deal with Jerry Greenberg for J.J. Fad and Michelet, but I'm not sure. And we come down in the elevator from his party, which was very boring.
Mm-hmm.
And on the elevator are three big black guys. Big. And Diana Ross and Shaka Khan were on the elevator. Me and Eazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, Eazy started giggling, you know. And these three big black guys were looking at us, you know. And I said, oh. So they started rapping. And the record's not out yet, man. This is 88. The record's not out yet. And they rapped the whole Boys in the Hood. They knew every word. Now, the record's not out. We were selling it at the swap meets in Compton, you know, at the rodeo. But out of the trunks of our cars, you know. But the record wasn't out. There was nothing. Nobody even knew who we were, just locally. We're in New York now with these three big black guys who are rapping and giggling. And I said, Eazy. I said, do you understand, man, that our record's not out and these guys know the words of the song? He said, oh, you mean Run DMC? That's who it was.
Wow. Yeah. I got it. We got to end it on that because, yeah, that's too perfect of a punchline.